What's your role and your background in mobile software development?
Yeah, so my name is Samuel Vulakh. I've been doing I've been doing basically full stack development for a while now, but I focus in mobile applications with backends. I've been doing that for 5 years now, and like Pieces is really great. I didn't really use snippets before. What I used to do was I used to just try to find the code the last place I used it, and just like basically I was looking around for it. But like I've looked at other like snippets products, and they were just very hard to use and overcomplicated. But I like how Pieces it's very simple. You just paste it in, or you can even generate it straight from natural language, right? And also I really like the code generation. ChatGPT never really did it for me, because whenever I had a question, it would import libraries that don't exist and do different things. For Apple, it would import private libraries that aren't accessible to the public, private APIs. So I really like that Pieces has the ability to use different AI models, and I make a lot of use of that. And it's also it makes my life much faster. The main thing that I use it for, or one of the main things I use it for, is like I mainly develop in Swift for Xcode and TypeScript and a TypeScript backend. So converting Swift objects to TypeScript interfaces sometimes is really annoying, and it's really great to have Pieces, and I can just plug it in and say convert it to a TypeScript interface, and then I have it stored there, and I can annotate. Sometimes I like to annotate the variables, what they do. I can just press annotate code, and it'll automatically do that for me, and it's really nice overall. Great product.
You mentioned Xcode. Are there any other
Mhm.
sort of tools that you use in your tool stack or other languages that you code in?
Yeah, so I mean, I can code in anything, but mainly what I usually do is I do TypeScript, JavaScript, Swift, Kotlin, HTML, and different things like that. I tried to use different AI tools for Xcode, but none of them really work, and all of them require just from subscription, which isn't the best. But Pieces is it's great, and you can also like when I'm looking at Stack Overflow and I have the Chrome extension, I'm able to just paste. I can create a new snippet straight from there, which is awesome.
I want to learn more about your workflow in your day-to-day projects as a mobile developer. So Pieces is really great for the three pillars of a common development workflow. You're researching, problem solving in the browser, you're coding in the IDE, and you're collaborating with teammates. And we also have the desktop application, which is a centralized place to keep those materials and input it into your other tools. Walk me through your process and how Pieces fits into that workflow.
Yeah. So what I used to do is I used to just store it. I used to just basically whenever I would code, I do many different projects. I do projects that you like implement the user's location. I would have to use Apple's MapKit API, and I would do projects that use Apple's Music API, right, to access their music library. And what I used to do is I used to just look for a project that I did before that used it. Let's say I was using trying to use location for a client. I would try to find the last place that I used the MapKit API and just copy paste that code. But it's really great to be able to just store it all in one place and just access it whenever I need to. Like it's really great for me.
Is there any other ways that you're transforming it in the or working with it in the desktop app before you use it in the IDE?
Oh yeah, a lot of times I like to annotate the code in the desktop app, so that'll like for future reference, it'll automatically just annotate each line and tell you what everything that's going on, so that I don't have to parse through it and figure it out for next time. I could just press a button and it'll automatically do all that for me. I could also sometimes I like to edit the code. Like let's say I want to make a change into snippet, so I can edit it directly in the interface as an IDE, which is great. That helps me a lot.
Cool. So let's talk about the Copilot and the generative AI aspect of
Mhm.
Pieces. Do you find yourself using the Copilot in the desktop application more or right there in your IDE in Code?
A lot of times when I remember that I need to do a piece, I'm very forgetful. So that's why I downloaded I had a ChatGPT extension, but I never use any of my extensions. So I usually just go to the app. But whenever I remember that the Pieces Copilot is there, then I always use that.
Okay, interesting. So you find that maybe GitHub Copilot is a little bit more intuitive when you're in the app because it's based on auto completion as opposed to a separate sort of tab that's next to your work.
Yeah, so for like very small things, I like GitHub Copilot is just right there because it's as I'm typing. But for when I need like an actual block of code to be generated, I prefer to use Pieces. I usually go to default to Pieces. If I need help with a specific task and I already have like a block of code that's already implemented, usually just to give it an idea of what I'm looking for, I would just right click on that and then I would just ask it a task and it already has context to go off of. So it's much easier for it to understand what I'm trying to get it to do. It's great to have like when I like you just post it. A lot of times when I open the pieces interface, since I already have copied some code, it just asks me if I want to paste that right in, which is great. And it's very easy to use as a whole. In the past, the main tools that I've tried to use in the past are GitHub Copilot and just ChatGPT straight. As I mentioned, ChatGPT I never really used. That's why Pieces was the first real AI tool that really worked for me, because any AI tools that I've tried before, unless they were just small things, generating actual blocks of code, it would just jump between errors and it would never actually solve any of my problems. The Pieces is the first AI tool that actually was able to help me with my coding. Sometimes I would put something into ChatGPT, and no matter how hard I specify for it to do something, it would return one error, and then I would ask it to fix the error it returned, and then it would return another error, and then when fixing the other error, it would return the original error, and then it would jump between those two, and it would never work.
Do you think there are any sort of features that or ways that you use Pieces that are unique to you as a mobile developer?
So with me, I have to basically train a lot of my front and objects or backend interfaces like between each other. So sometimes that gets very tedious. As like in Swift, I use the code protocol, which basically requires everything to be spelled correctly in order for everything to work. So I can just paste the TypeScript interface into the Pieces Copilot and say generate me a Swift object, and it'll generate it for me. And then I can automatically annotate everything from there based on my TypeScript annotations, which is awesome. And then I can just paste that right into my Xcode project without any issues. So I think that really helps for mobile development. I had an issue where I needed to generate I just needed to build a function for a project I was working on that would generate every single day in the last 30 days. And this is one of my first time using Pieces. So I wasn't that attuned to defaulting to it at that time. And I went to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT wouldn't do it properly. It was returning the wrong thing. And then I went into Pieces, and it basically for like simple like iterations, like loops and stuff where I needed to return, working with JavaScript objects, I needed to return a certain amount of things. It helps me cut down on like allocating like 10 minutes to implementing that function. I can just paste it into Pieces and it'll take 30 seconds.
Do you find any efficiency gains from not only having the standalone application, but having the browser extension, having the VS Code plugin?
Yeah, so it is great having the browser extension is great because I can go jump straight into the Pieces app. And it also a lot of times when I'm like just coding, if I forget about Pieces and I roll over a snippet, then I have that reminder that I can just jump into that and launch a Copilot straight from that, which is awesome. And VS Code, and where I can just right click on something and ask to get and go jump straight into AI from a right click, which is awesome, which helps a lot. And I don't have to really, it's really a hassle for me. For me, when I'm like already working on something, to jump into a Chrome tab and open ChatGPT and ask the prompt, it's worth it just for me to keep on trying to figure it out myself. Whereas with Pieces, I can just right click and jump straight in.
Awesome. Cool. Well, tell me about what you didn't like about Pieces, or maybe features that you'd like to see in the future.
So the one thing, I think I mentioned this earlier, is that there are so many different features that since there are so many different buttons that do different things, sometimes I have an issue. Originally, I had an issue being able to edit my piece in the app. I had to look around for the edit button. Since there's so many different things you can do, just finding each individual thing. Sometimes it was originally a difficulty, and what would be great to have in the future. But eventually, you figure out where everything is, just as with every other application. And what would be great for the future is to be able to double click on a piece and just turn it straight into like edit mode, where I can just edit the piece inside the Pieces application. That would be awesome. Everything it's really easy to use, and it makes my life easier as a developer.
That's great to hear. Awesome. Well, yeah. Any other final thoughts or comments before we adjourn?
Oh no, I just want to say I really like the product. Genuinely, I really like the product, and it helps me a lot. Yeah, that's mainly it. It really no, it just makes because once I started, it really cut down on my work, it cut down on my time with just basic functions, like just basic functions that were necessary but are like just general knowledge. it just cuts down on that, and I don't have to allocate like 10 to 15 minutes. Instead, I could just take 30 seconds to do it, which helps me out a lot.